We all are gonna die. 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 Why don't we help each other prepare for it? Without death there could not be life. I'm talking about end of life conversations, conversations about the end of life. Death and dying, grief and loss, conversations about the end of life.
Ask friends for help when you are overwhelmed. Do not set time limits for yourself. If grief flares suddenly, as grief will do, cancel plans, even at the last minute. So it's really a book about giving you permission to live through something that you've never lived through before.
Welcome to this episode of End of Life Conversations. I'm Reverend Wakil David Matthews.
And I'm the Reverend Mother, Ana Luisa Armendariz. In this podcast, we share people's experiences with death and dying, grief and loss, and the end of life.
We really enjoy all of our excellent and insightful guests. They generously tell their stories with compassion and wisdom. We also want to thank Wakil and Wendy's children and partners for that wonderful introductory song. Okay, let's get started.
Welcome. Today, we are excited to speak with Pamela Belyea. Pamela is a licensed architect and co-founder of Seattle's Gage Academy of Art, where she served as director for 23 years. After losing 6 family members in 15 months, Pamela channeled her grief into founding the Grievers Library, a volunteer-run bibliotherapy nonprofit providing free grief books to children, teens, and adults through book boxes in and around Seattle.
It's such a great thing. The organization's website also offers some unique resources. One's called Global, which is a directory of grief books available in public libraries worldwide. Easy Reads, which is a directory of short, meaningful excerpts from the grief books, and a list of crisis hotlines. I really love that Easy Reads directory. I've used that several times. Calling the Grievers Library her compassion project, Pamela is dedicated to keeping it refreshingly non-commercial. The library is supported by the generosity of community businesses, donors, and volunteers. My wife discovered one of her grief libraries in our town, and I contacted her to see how we could help. I asked her to join us on this podcast, and we are really proud to support the work by keeping our little library here in Edmonds stocked. And we've been thrilled at the constant use it receives. Every week we put more books in. So welcome, Pamela. We're so glad to have you. We always like to begin our podcasts by getting to know people a little bit, by asking them if you could tell us when you first became aware of death.
Well, that's a question that I rephrase. I say, when did you meet death? I kind of see it as a moment, an encounter, a moment of reckoning. But for me, I want to say I was one of those clueless individuals until I was 65.
Wow.
That's pretty extraordinary. It doesn't mean that I didn't know about death or that I didn't cry when I read the newspaper, which my son always laughed at me for. To finally be impacted in a really deep personal loss, I was 65. And, when you look at this and you deal with it, you now understand why there's so many clueless people around you.
Yeah.
And we know what that word means. It means they say the wrong thing, they do the wrong thing, they don't give a lot of support, they don't understand what you're going through. And I just want you to know, I was one of those people for 65 years. But now that I've met death, and many people have, I have a statement that I make, and I say, our compassion meter goes to 10. We see things differently, we treat people differently, and we show up. And showing up, by the way, I think is probably the best thing anybody can do for someone in grief.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what we hear over and over again. That's the number one thing you can do, to show up without expectations and without any preconceived notions of what needs to happen.
People are always asking you, because I've just been dealing with a near-death experience in my family. How can we help? How can we help? Do you really want to tell them that things you need help with? They're stupid. But if they show up, and they say, I got 2 hours. You say, oh, baby, can you do this for me? And they will.
Yeah.
So showing up is, I think, really key to supporting grievers.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. Thank you. Go ahead, Annalisa.
Oh, no. I was just thinking as she said that, and we talk about this quite a bit, like, don't tell them don't ask what you need, but you say, I can fix you a meal. I will be there on Monday night. But, it just occurred to me as just thinking about this last week with my community, it's like, that is something all of us need as a daily practice, like listening and just showing up when we can. Not always.
Showing up.
Yeah.
We had a nanny who took care of our son who belonged to a church in Wallingford, near Wallingford, and she loved doing laundry. So she did a lot of laundry. Very unusual. I'm not kidding. If you had a death in the family and she found it out from the church, she would ring your doorbell and you'd open the door and Dodie would be standing there and she would just say, I'm here to do your laundry. You would be like, what?
Yeah.
And it turns out you don't change your sheets. You don't get your laundry done.
Yes.
And she would just come, do all the laundry, fold it all, and leave.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so great. What a great example.
What a beautiful gift.
That's a gift. And I think that when people are grieving, maybe I'm jumping here, the two things to bring are soup and soap.
Tell me more about the soap.
Well, the soup is easy because we want to make their life easy. The soap is self-care. A beautiful soap is something that you can get in a bathtub and enjoy. And they kind of sound good together, soup. Well, I, for a while, was making Grievers baskets as gifts to people. And I would collect baskets and I would collect candles and I'd collect teas and I would collect mugs. And I was just waiting until I heard about someone. And then I would just send over the grief basket with hot soup in it.
Okay, so that's really an amazing awareness of that need, the soup and soap. Did that start when you met death?
No.
Or was it prior?
No. Yes. That's the question. No, I did not. I didn't show up for people. I didn't get any of this. No, I'm now fully aware. And so I go back to 2020, 2019-ish, 2020 and my husband, I drove him crazy because, I'm collecting all this stuff. I've been driving my husband crazy for 48 years, but the last 5, I think I may be topping myself.
Great. That's such a great story. Yeah, thank you. The other thing is we always like to know more about what you're doing, your current role. We spoke a little bit about it in the introduction. Can you tell us more about the Grievers Library and kind of the inspiration for it and how it's begun and how it is working or not working?
No one really ever knows when they have a little impact on someone else. You really don't know. I could tell stories, but in this case, I was in a grief support group and there was a woman trying to get a copy of My Son, which is a book for mothers who've lost a child to suicide. And it was written by Iris Bolton, who's very old, but still with us. And I had a copy and I had read it. And there were about 3 big points I got from the book that were meaningful to me. And I thought, she's way over there, I think, up close to Edmonds, by the way. And I'm way down here in Ballard. And so the first day she says, boy, I'm trying to get a copy of My Son. And I say, wow, I've got a copy. And I talk about it. So the next time she comes online, I say, did you get your book? She's like, no, I didn't get the book. And then the next time I say, did you get the book? Now she's suffering from grief brain. She probably never ordered it. She probably thought she ordered it. She didn't order it. And I thought, this is crazy. There are all these people who could use a resource, but how did they get it? How did they find it? And of course, Amazon's waiting to sell them the book. But how can we gift this kind of support to other people? And I had gone online to the public library in Seattle and I typed in grief books. And it turns out that they had like 1,600. And the first one was history. The second one was a thriller. But I had the wrong word. You need bereavement.
Mm.
That's the Library of Congress word.
Mhm.
So the thing was, you couldn't find what you needed. And your friends are clueless, so
Mhm.
they don't have a book for you. And I just thought about it and thought, what would happen if you put the books out there? And so I'm an architect, and I have a driveway well below my house because I'm on a hill. And I drew a drawing of this book box in my driveway and a bench. And I thought, I'll just keep the books in the garage and I'll have a book box and people can come and get books. Well, my husband vetoed that. He did not want grievers coming by. He didn't want to come down the stairs and meet these people.
Mm.
So, you ask, what am I doing? Well, we've been building book boxes with volunteers, everything's donated in this project, and everybody is paid in homemade cookies. That is, believe it or not, homemade cookies can get you $900 worth of lumber.
Wow.
Because those guys are so thrilled. I always say to them, the only currency we have is love. And I have
Beautiful.
it right here in a
Mhm.
box of homemade cookies. And they go, what do you need?
It's so sweet. I love that.
I am not
I
kidding.
love that.
We have been paying everybody in cookies,
Uh-huh.
but they have to be homemade.
And they're good cookies, by the way.
They can be pretty good. I don't think Joaquil David has gotten any yet. So what's happened is we invented a program where we would put these book boxes in our community. And then I set out, the book boxes weren't so hard to build. It wasn't so hard to find the people, find the love, find the donations. But then you go out and you say, may we cite a book box
Mhm.
near your business? And, will you give us support? Like, we do need library stewards. And it took over a year to get the first site. Because, and I say this metaphorically, Grievers Library book boxes are radioactive. Nobody wants one near them. They're terrified of
They
them.
had the cooties.
They have cooties because you might meet a griever. And nobody knows this. But by the way, it's the great equalizer. If you're in a grief support group, you can have a bank president and a truck driver, and they're together. They're on common ground.
Yeah.
So when you say you're not that interested in meeting a griever, well, you might be missing out.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
they're amazing people who are in the same place. But anyways, I think you may have read in a newspaper article that I went to the city and I located 5 community centers that were well spaced through the city that had parks. And I said, would you store our books and can we have a box in front of your community center? And I went through the park department. I went through the legal department. I went through the city department. I wrote a letter to the mayor. There was no way. And their response was, it's not appropriate on city property. So that was the beginning of my kind of trying to, it was really hard. That's all I have to say. It was really hard. And then the very first one we put up was in front of a senior center in Greenwood. And it got vandalized a couple of times, meaning books stolen. But then somebody torched the box.
Oh, jeez.
And so that was a little shocking. They weren't very good. They must have been very, very high. If they'd really wanted to torch it, they would have lit a book on fire.
Right?
But they just kept taking their Bic lighter and trying to burn the box. So they didn't do that well. But so they didn't destroy the box, but it made it perfectly clear we were too close to Aurora. We were too close to drug traffic. And we ended up putting it in Crown Hill Cemetery in North Valley. And I will say business is a little slow in a cemetery.
Yeah.
There you go. So we have 8 of them now. But the 8th one is an interesting story. We were behind Town Hall on First Hill, and I was really proud of that. We were right by the farm doors, and I was really proud of it because Town Hall is such a community vortex. It does such important work, and there we were right behind it. And the problem was we kept getting vandalized. And finally, they ripped the door off, they smashed the glass, and it just seemed like this wasn't going to work. There was too big a drug scene. So I kept thinking, downtown, we need something central. But if we put up boxes, the vandalism is going to be a recurring problem. We'd had the same problem in the U District until we moved a box. So this extraordinary little moment happened. I don't know if you hang out in Seattle, but the Zeitgeist Cafe is in Pioneer Square. And they had a little book box that was so old that it had the number 361, Little Free Library. And nobody has that number. There are 200,000 now. So I was chatting with them about their book box and said, can we put some grief books in there? And we ended up getting a whole shelf, 35 books in their cabinetry, putting up the signage. And now we have a resource in Pioneer Square where people can take a book, sit down, have a cup of coffee, take it home with them. And we just set it up 2 days ago.
Oh, beautiful.
So cool.
Beautiful.
So it was a really great flip because I know that it's not going to be torn apart at night.
Right, exactly.
But your book box, Wakil David Matthews, is the most successful book box that we have. In their book box, it's well stocked by you and Wendy. It has incredibly interested traffic, and and there's about 14 books a week are being borrowed.
Yeah.
And as you know, they're borrowed is a euphemism.
Right, because they don't come back. Yeah. Well, I want to just talk about that a bit because, like I said, when we first contacted Pamela, we kind of, I just was like, "That's such a cool thing you're doing," and I remember you said, "How'd you get my phone number?" But I'm a good hacker, so actually, it wasn't that hard because I think you posted something on the box. Yeah, you posted something on the box that I found. But anyway, all that said, I was so impressed by the idea, and then when you talked to us, you said, "Well, the person there next door was supposed to keep it stocked and they aren't doing it." And so we took it over. We're so happy to do that. And I think part of it is because, first of all, it's, and unfortunately, in some ways, it's very homogenous, basically old white folks living right down here, and it's what a perfect group to be dealing with that more often than not, So there's a lot of people here who are probably often dealing with end of life. So that's probably why it's the best one. And we just think it's best because we're doing it.
Yeah, but the woman at Zeitgeist, she responded to my request, the owner, within an hour.
So
Nobody
good. So
does
good.
that.
Yeah.
And so when I met her, of course, I asked the question, when did you meet death? And her response was, I was brought up by a single mom and she died when I was 15.
Wow.
So it's not just those old people.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah, very good point.
Well, and last October I took a week-long camping trip and I ended up at Chaco Canyon. And on my last morning, I decided to do the campground tour. I always mean to do it at the beginning and I wait till the end. But there was a little library box at the entrance of the camp ground. And I flipped through the books and I noticed that in the kids section, there were books about death and dying for kids. It was a Sesame Street one. And I was like, so stinking cool. Like, I love that was offered. Who knows who needs that book out there, right?
Well, what's interesting about the children's books, if you use bereavement to find adult books, children's books are about frogs and bears. It's a lot harder. But I have lists. I have lists for preteens who've lost a parent or a friend or a sibling. I have lists of teens. We have lists, and we work those lists to buy our books.
Yeah. I also would point out that one of the things you do, which I think is amazing and awesome, and you must have, I don't know where you get the time, is you mark every single book with what category it comes under. So we, as for us, when we're setting it up or putting things in, we want to have as many kind of variety, a wide variety. But then you have a little thing
like
on the
coding
chart on the
we invented
the coding.
We invented it because we discovered this is amazing. You don't know it until you dig. There's hundreds of books to serve people in grief. But if you put a griever in front of 100 books and you say, I know there's a book here that would be meaningful to you, they can't pick any of them. It's impossible. So if they can see on the spine spouse loss or parent loss suicide or military death, we have like 8 big categories. We have a total of 54 categories and topics. So you can actually see memoir, suicide, sibling loss, and they're color-coded on the top and labels on the bottom. And you don't know how I have the time because I have work parties and I have 6 people come for 3 hours and we labeled 250 books.
That's what it takes.
Yeah, and we have a party. We throw on the music, we have food, and I do it every 2 months.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
It's on my calendar. I'm hoping to join you this time.
Well, I have teens. March 8th, I have the teens of Ballard High School coming.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Very
That's so cool. Yeah, I love that.
I feel like that's the support, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Volunteers. We only do this with volunteers.
Yeah.
So volunteerism is key to this.
Okay.
I made the decision from the get-go that I personally would never benefit from grief. So that I would never be paid for this work. All of the money would go to books. If people gave us money, which we do receive. And in fact, for every $10 we receive, we put a donor label in a book. So some people will give us $1,000 and they'll get 100 labels. And they're helping us buy 100 books.
Awesome. That's really good. I think it'd be nice to kind of give you a chance to give us some examples of some of the books, because I know you said you had a stack of them there. And maybe you could just show us a few of the books as examples.
Well, I want to say something about reading grief books.
Okay.
So my whole life, I've been a book nibbler. I was not a good book reader. No, I'm not really a reader. I'm a doer. And there's many of us who are like this. So reading grief books was possible because I could do nothing else, because I was non-functional. So I haven't read every book that we give away. I kind of look for references, but there are certain books that are very appealing to me. So the first one is actually written by a Seattle author, and it's called A Little Book of Self-Care for Those Who Grieve. And I guess the reason I like it is she only has about 20 words per page.
Yeah, it's good.
I can definitely nibble this book. And then what does this page say? It says, if you have ashes, take time with them. Keep them nearby as long as you want. Try to say goodbye. So she's giving you permission. And most people are pushing you to move on. You need those ashes out of here, Jonathan. They're not you. But it turns out you're allowed to keep the ashes. You're allowed to keep everything.
Right.
So here it is. Ask friends for help when you are overwhelmed. Do not set limits for yourself, time limits for yourself. If grief flares suddenly, as grief will do, cancel plans, even at the last minute. So it's really a book about giving you permission to live through something that you've never lived through before.
It's transition. Yep.
So that's a great book. This is a terrific book, Bearing the Unbearable. Everybody knows her. Her name's Joanne Cacciatore, PhD. And what's so great about it is she wrote the book in 52 short chapters. And that means you can eat it one bite at a time.
Back to nibbling, yeah.
Yeah, it's a real nibble book. But the other thing is she's the real thing. And she sees it, knows it, has lived it, and she's got wonderful ideas. I've written to her, never heard back from her, so that's how busy she is, because I wanted one of her. I wanted part of this book to excerpt, and I probably need to get back to that. Here's a book that's unusual, Send My Roots Rain. And the author, it says, A Companion on the Grief Journey, and Kim Langley. It's published by a Christian publishing house, but it's not a Christian book. It is a book of poetry. I think I read the whole book. It says dusk to twilight, sunset, midnight, starlight to dawn. Those are the categories. It is so thoughtful. And she is so beautifully deep, and she she gets it. We used one of the poems from this book in the Easy Reads on the Grievers Library website.
Pamela, I don't know how many books you have left, but do you have maybe 1 or 2 children's books that you could share on your list up there?
Okay, so I'm only going to show 2. You asked for 2.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
So the first book is this one. Maybe dying is like becoming a butterfly. And my husband, who's been quite ill, wants to read this to his grandson because it's a very slow, wise telling that you're going to be gone. But maybe you will still be there.
Yeah.
Maybe you will become a butterfly. So my husband actually asked me at the breakfast this morning if I had a copy here because he's ready to read it to our 6-year-old.
Oh, sweet.
So here's an interesting thing. Who knew that Goodnight Moon author Margaret Brown wrote a book for children about life and death? And it's called The Dead Bird. And it's set in New York City. It's very Central Parky. And it's for children to really understand that things will end. Death will be something that is part of the cycle. And it's funny because it's very similar to this book, which is I Found a Dead Bird, which are all things that children do.
Yeah.
And you contextualize it as an idea about the beautiful flying bird, and now the bird is in your hand. So those are a couple of, we have lots of children's books.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are supported by the Safe Crossings Foundation with a grant each year, and their whole vision is to support grieving children. So all of our children's books have their donor labels in them.
Oh, sweet. Yeah,
That is amazing.
we definitely will post contact information for you and your website at the end, and it'd be great for people to get in touch. And I would love to see people say, send us the plans for how we do this.
Well, I've been asked all over the country to give it to them, but
Yeah.
I've thought about it a lot. It's just plain determination. I can give them the book list. We buy all of our books used, so I'm not that keen to have competitors because we will clear out every children's grief book every 3 months. We will buy everything that we can get our hands on. Our budget for a book is $6 max.
Wow.
And we buy most used books for $3 to $4. But what's beautiful is authors donate books to us, and they typically will send 10 to 20. And these are $20 books.
Yeah.
So they are in our book box as gifts to other people. And there's only one reason they do this. They wrote the book to help others.
Right.
Yeah.
They know that our book box is primed for people who want help. So it's really a beautiful thing because we won't advertise and we won't affiliate, but we will write that you gave us that book on our website.
Yeah.
That's so
very
lovely.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, in a way, it's like, even if they don't need to ask you for help with this, they can just do it if they feel the inspiration. You can be an inspiration, maybe, and maybe then it won't be so competitive. I hope it doesn't get to be where you have to fight with people.
What I've explained to people is you're much better off doing resource tables than book boxes. And we do resource tables. So if there's a suicide walk, you show up with a table, you put up your little sign, and you give books to the survivors of suicide who are doing the walk. We probably do 5 to 8 resource tables a year. And that is the easy. Everybody wants you if they're doing an event for grievers. So you're in the door.
Sure.
And the people who are there are very interested in what you're doing. They can't believe you're giving it away. That's always a question. But resource tables are much easier than trying to build a box, find a location, install a box, and keep it stocked.
Yeah.
And keep
That's
it
a good idea,
rebuilt
though.
when they burn it. Yeah, I like that. That's great. Thank you. So go ahead, Anna Luisa.
So we were wondering, how do you keep yourself resourced, having this as a passion project?
Me or the project?
You
Me?
physically, mentally, emotionally,
I'm a wreck.
spiritually.
I am totally a wreck. In fact, in November, I decided that my book that I will never write will be called Numb, and dumb that I was dealing with my husband almost dying and my whole world falling apart, which is anticipatory grief, by the way.
Yeah.
And I was looking for books on anticipatory grief. But I also discovered something really sad, that when you're in the middle of all this, you don't want to read a book. When you're in the middle. But how do I knew that was a question you were going to ask me. So I realized I am getting my support through an amazing family, including a really sweet identical twin sister. How's that? Nobody's got one of those.
Yeah.
Nope. So cool.
And a fabulous, a really loving daughter, and then 3 wonderful, joyful grandchildren. But the other piece I have is I belong to about 3 or 4 large communities of people. And as you know, because you belong to several communities, that's support.
Yeah.
There's support waiting to be gifted to you. People always want to have tea with me, go for a walk. Those things are supporting me. They're giving me love. And I have other projects that I do that we're not going to discuss here. And I garden. I garden.
Okay.
That's
I
a good
heard
one.
someone talking about gardening. They said they couldn't get back to their garden after a hurricane. They couldn't do it again. I have to tell you, I garden. And gardening is an extraordinary gift of renewal, light, love, even the bugs. You know,
It's the medicine.
gardening is really my gift.
Oh, that's wonderful. Perfect. What a good answer.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like often we hear that the place to get your support is in the dirt.
Mhm.
So, yeah, thank you. That was great. Well, we always end with asking you if you have anything that you'd like to share that we didn't get to.
You didn't ask me if I was afraid of dying.
There you go. There you go. We didn't. That's right, because we were thinking we're running out of time, but go ahead. Yeah. What about that?
I have been thinking about that since I saw that question. It turns out I'm not.
Mm.
I mean, I realize that when you've lived with a big death, you often horribilize a lot of things. You get scared when your kids don't come home on time or when your husband doesn't call at 10 o'clock. Horribilizing is something that our brains will do. And I think that I am refusing to horribilize death because it's going to be what it is. We're not taking control. It can happen. It can happen in so many ways. So I have decided, and I watched someone die in my home. It was my mother-in-law. She was 95, and it was peaceful and beautiful. But I just read a book where she's describing her husband dying, and it's not good. And I realized we're going to roll into this thing, and we're going to roll out of it. And that's
Yes, ma'am. We sure are.
Yeah, one way or the other.
I know. And the other thing is mediums. I think that's a really interesting topic. We could have it at a different time. But have you met or interviewed any mediums?
Well, we did talk
We
to
did.
somebody. Yeah, we talked to
Yeah.
my
Your cousin.
my mother's cousin told us a bunch of great stories about her having many, many connections after her daughter and her mother died. And all of these things, butterflies, as you were talking about butterflies earlier, I thought about her because she said one of the things that happened when her daughter died was butterflies started showing up for the whole family all over the place, no matter, where butterflies that didn't live there, would show up. So yeah, that's probably the closest thing. But I think another medium, if you know some, please
there is a local. There's a medium in Oklahoma.
Send her our way.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I just have to tell you, I'd love to meet another medium. I've only met one. And by the way, we have hummingbirds. Is our theme. Hummingbirds everywhere.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. I love those too. Wonderful. Well, good. Thank you so much, Pamela. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And really, the work you're doing is phenomenal and really happy to be helping out with it. And, I hope people are inspired to do something like it. But I like your idea of tables. I think that might be an easier way to go. But yeah, we'll have put everything.
Soups and soaps. I like the soup and soap.
Yeah.
And then numb and dumb.
Numb and
Numb and
dumb.
dumb. have to hold that for a while.
Yeah, I totally felt that for sure. All right. Well, we're very glad to have had this conversation. And when we're done, we always like to invite our guests to read something that is important to them, a poem or a quote. And Pamela, you have something to read, I believe. Want to tell us about it?
There are a lot of quotes that I could find for you, but I picked the final 3 paragraphs of a book by Linda Shanti McCabe. She's actually Dr. McCabe. She has a doctorate in psychology, and it's called After Your Person Dies, Affirmations for Grief, Making Meaning, and Going On. I think it's a very wise and gentle book. She illustrated it. And I also like the fact that type is really big. Not a textbook. It's actually it's a kind of typeface that looks like handwriting.
Oh, nice.
It's a very welcoming book for someone who's looking for a way to get through the passage of grief or to find a way to make it work. My husband said he thinks this is not a quote for new grievers.
Okay.
We'll decide that at the end, but this is the very end of her book. Don't let your grief be your whole life. Let it be like books on the shelf you can take down and read. Let it be the special dishes you make or sprinkled in as a seasoning. It can't be everything. Don't let it be, or you will get stuck. The world won't be the same for you because you are not the same. You are a new butterfly, a phoenix rising from ashes, a fragile and strong flower who has grown roots deep in the soil of Mother Earth. You have a new life and an old life. They are both in you. You do not have to move on without your loved one. You can move forward, carrying their memory and your lived experience together in your heart. You will learn to carry grief with grace.
Beautiful. Yeah. I don't know if that would be, I guess your husband might be right, but on the other hand, I think anybody would probably benefit from hearing those words. And
I think it's really hard at the beginning to know that you will ever go past your grief. It
That's
really
true.
is a way to stay connected to the person. I sort of equate grief and love as absolute equivalents. So if you are in deep grief, you're never going to let go. But it turns out that eventually you find ways to walk forward and you don't move on, which is really
very important.
People want you to because they're uncomfortable. But it's not for you to take care of their level of comfort.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us on the End of Life Conversations. We appreciate you and look forward to sharing our stories. We encourage you to subscribe to have access to premium episodes and extra resources. Links to our guests and their recommendations and a transcript of this episode will be in the podcast notes.
Yes, thank you so much. And please tell all your friends. Follow us on social media, and again, consider subscribing for some excellent premium content. We want to acknowledge that the music we are using was composed and produced by Charles Heastand. We also want to acknowledge that we live on unceded lands that have been cared for thousands of years by Indigenous peoples who are still here.